You were stupid, you were dumb, you were worthless. You really didn't know anything. And so I was raised in that kind of environment. So my experience and what I'm going to hope to introduce is a, a very different way of dealing with trauma. My experience with trauma very early on is filled with domestic violence and chemical dependency. My father was a alcoholic and a batterer, 3 generations of men who beat their wives and drank. And ultimately ended up using something else. So I was raised in a household where the sound of my mother's bones breaking would go through my body to such an extent that even as a young man, I felt like I had no backbone. So I was raised in that kind of environment. In 1960, my father was murdered over a drug deal. He was trying to make a living by fixing cars and selling scripts for pharmaceutical liquid amphetamine. I don't know why they prescribed that. I don't know why that was available, but it made people psychotic. If anyone here has any experience with methamphetamine, you know the impact of methamphetamine-induced psychosis. So I come from very dark, rooted place in the now what the Mexica philosophy. I come from the Techcatlipoca, the smoking mirror perspective. There are other people that have the Quetzalcoatl, the light, the science oriented, the lightness. And so I've learned to work with people to come from the dark place to really understand what the light is. So my experience is from there, and I've had 40 years of practicing as a psychologist. I've got 10 years practicing as a traditional medicine person, as a curandero that works and concentrates on the treatment of susto. And I'll talk about that in terms of how we view the notion of dealing with traumatic experiences from the traditional medicine, Mesoamerican medicine. And I think it's important for us to understand that we don't do it alone. We don't try to help people alone, not the way Western psychologists in the United States and England, and Europe try to deal with people from an individual perspective, from an intrapsychic perspective, from a pathological perspective, from medical model perspective. This idea is of healing really requires that we keep in mind that we weren't traumatized by ourselves. And in order to heal, we have to do it in community. So that's one of the things I want to emphasize. So the intent here today is for us to do a little reflecting. Why are you here? Why are you a social worker? Why are you a healer? Why are you an advocate for justice? And I think it's important for us to reflect on that and to think about that. And what is it that we need to do in order to heal ourselves? What wounds do we carry? What do we have to pay attention to? What abandonment, neglect, abuse we might have suffered from the South direction, the direction of the children, direction of new learning? Was there some early wounding there that we need to take care of? Do we have impairment from the East, which is the place of the men, the place of logos, the place of seeing things from far away, the ego's place, the man's place? Sometimes men come very wounded because they never felt empowered, never felt that they were strong providers, or they didn't have the role models for them. Have we not had enough time to do reflecting or connect to the ocean? We're in Guam. We're all in Guam today, and your medicine is the ocean. Your medicine is the water. In this side of the world, we pray to Yemeya, the spirit of the ocean, the Orisha of the ocean. And so it's important to be able to move in and move out, which is a lot of what grief is. Grief moves in like a wave sometimes, bowls us over, and sometimes it's just very soft and gentle. It's soothing. So the ocean is a very powerful balance to the male. The children need the elders to attend to them, to direct them, to guide them, to bless them. I'm a grandfather. I have 7 grandchildren, and none of my grandchildren know the pain that I came from, or the dysfunction that I came from, or the fact that I am a recovering addict, or that I'm an ex-con, that I spent several years in the state penitentiary for drug addiction and sales of narcotics. So it is possible to heal, and I want to introduce that in this way for us to have that hope, that understanding, and the way we do that, is we, each one of you, each and our communities respond in a way that holds the space. I'm here. I see you. I understand you, and I'm going to be here for you. So the most important thing that a community, a family, an individual wants to know from us is, are you the one? Are you the one I can tell about what it was like growing up in a household where there was violence? Are you the one that I can talk to about having been violated and raped? Are you the one that I can describe and let you know what it feels like to have been abandoned and neglected? And so that's what I do. That's the work that's my calling. That's what the Creator called and asked of me. All of the changes that I went through and all of the things that I did, and the addiction and the penitentiary and the trying to find a PhD to find a way out of the world, was really just to look at myself inside and say, look, you have to attend to the darkness so you can help others find the light. So that's the medicine. That's what we're going to talk about today. A model that I've developed and worked on, not alone, in community. I have a number of faculty that are traditional healers. We have a book called Cultura de Bienestar. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a minute. But all of these healers, there's a group in Mexico, in Morelos, in the state of Morelos, called SEDEC, where people learn how to be traditional healers. There's a new one starting here in the San Francisco Bay Area in Marin County. There is a conference that is offered to teach people how to practice traditional medicine, bringing healers from really all over the world. It's called Curanderismo Sin Fronteras, Healing Without Borders, in University of New Mexico. And now they're bringing people back after this pandemic. So these are all people that we collaborate with, talk to, publish, write, treat, and use each other to really, as a community, be able to offer healing practices for people. So healing the individual and community from trauma is the intent. This perspective is a psychological and social justice perspective, which means you can't just heal the person alone and individually. You have to take into account the community. And we're in the middle of a new war now in Ukraine, a new war with Russia, a new war with NATO. It never ends. We are a traumatized species of people. And so we have to attend to that and be present and be available. Next slide, please. So this is the book. This book is available on Amazon. It is called Cultura de Bienestar, which means culture and wellness. And it's a collection of healers that worked with me in East Oakland, treating people who had a variety of different things: grief, loss, lots of trauma, lots of robbery, lots of assaults, lots of complex trauma, people migrating from Central America, Mexico, Nepal. I do a lot of evaluations from victims of Maoist terrorists in Nepal that, they're trying to get their immigration status accommodated for them, but they're traumatized. In Guatemala, the mom and mom Maya speaking people who have been robbed, violated, discriminated against, their houses burned, because they thought that the military thought that they were advocating for guerrilla forces. And the other side as well, guerrilla forces think that they were advocates for the military. So there are places around the world that continue to promote uh, horrific trauma on people, discriminate against people, denigrate them, and colonize them, violate them. So when they come to us, we have to be prepared to be able to hold the space so that we can hear the story. Next slide, please. So what happens when somebody comes? Somebody comes and they say to us, somebody just stole my van, my car. They put a gun to my head. I was going to the bank and they ripped my jewelry off of me. My daughter just told me that my husband touched her, has been touching her for long. So the intent, I think, what's important for me to understand and to be able to convey to the person or the community or the family that comes to see me is to make some sense out of what they're experiencing. There is very specific things that happen in the body and happen in the psyche, happen in the spirit that I think is important for people to understand. So when we are triggered, when we're threatened, when our lives are in a place of vulnerability and we've been harmed, we've been victimized. We have a central nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system that keeps us in balance. One helps us get ready for the day, it's our accelerator. The other one that helps us de-escalate, relax, take it easy, right? That's our normal functioning sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. But when we're threatened, what happens is we have a very specific nervous system called the limbic system. It is the amygdala and the hippocampus in the inner part of the brain, not the cerebellum where we breathe and have more motor activity and digest our food. This is that place where you have heard the term fight, flight, or freeze. And the reason it's fight, flight, or freeze is that it's activated to such a degree that we are hyper alert. The right side of the brain where we have spatial relations and emotion is, on steroids, right? It's hyper aroused. Our occipital region where we're processing our vision is also hyper aroused. So you will hear people say, I'm having nightmares and I'm having flashbacks. And that's because the right side and the occipital range are hyper aroused. So that's part of the symptomology that occurs. What happens at the same time that these two parts of the brain are hyper aroused, the left side of the brain where we have language and reasoning is offline. It means it's not functioning. How many times have you worked with somebody and they say, yeah, I can't talk about it? A veteran, a police officer, a fireman, a victim of domestic violence, they don't have the language because this side of the brain is offline. It's not working. As well as the frontal lobes where we have our executive decision-making is also offline. We can't really think about. How many times have we worked with battered women and they, say, well, he loves me. I know he loves me, so I let him back in the house. And everyone looks and they shake their head. But he's going to beat you and he's going to choke you. And that's what love is for that person. But nonetheless, this part of the brain is not working. So executive decision making. So these two sides of the brain are offline. These two sides of the brain are hyper aroused. So what's important to understand is that what has happened to us, our victimization, is that we are not responsible for what's happened. We're reacting in a normal way to an abnormal situation. So people come in and they have this, hyper arousal, this severe anxiety, some depression, a lot of helplessness, sometimes hopelessness, because if it's complex trauma, it's happened for a long time. So what's important is for us to be able to say to that person if they come in, I'm here. I'm here and I'm going to listen to you. I see you, I understand you, and I'm going to be there for you. That's called a secure attachment. So we want to begin with having a space. I want to burn my copal. I want to burn my incense. I want to cleanse my area, make sure that it's present. And when the person is coming in and they're feeling very tense and excited and really can't tell me what's actually going on, I'm going to give them a little lavender pouch, lavender seeds. And they're going to crush it. And they're going to breathe into the lavender pouch. This is a natural tranquilizer. 4 times, 8 times. But while they're breathing, I'm going to breathe with them, and I want them to breathe in and exhale down in the belly, in the diaphragm. Hold. So we're getting ourselves back in the body. We're out here, we're thinking all kinds of horrible things, what's happened to us. We're fearful, we're frightened, we're vulnerable, we're shaking, we're trembling. Bring the breathing in. Bring it home into the body, because we already feel out of control. We have to find ways. What can we control? I can control the sensations in my body. I can control my breathing. I can get my palpitations to come back into rhythm. I can try to work my central nervous system. And there are a variety of different things that you can do. We use acupuncture, auricular acupuncture. Ear therapy, it's called. Helps rebalance the central nervous system. I give them prescription of herbs. It's called hierbas, baño de nervios, lavender, rosemary, rue, we call it ruda in Spanish, the skin of a lemon, skin of an orange, white sage, all of those together in very hot water. Put it in your bathtub, add more water to it, 15 minutes. Let the mind get clear, let the body get back into equilibrium. And then a bath of alcohol. So we're teaching right from the very beginning, directing and helping the person feel safe and secure. So the intent, butterfly medicine, cocoon. We want to hold this person. We want to be present for them. We want to make it safe for them. Sometimes the curanderos take to do the cleansing at the site of the assault. I had a family of men, father and his sons, who lost their wife and mother to an automobile accident, a vehicle fatality in the Bayview in San Francisco. Guy was driving the car at 103 miles an hour, plows into the Uber. This woman was coming back from work. Uber driver and the woman are both dead. Family right in front of her church. So we did the cleansing for this particular family right there at the church, in front of the church, where the mother had passed. So that's one of the things that I want us to be aware of. Very different from the kind of psychotherapeutic, detached, objective process of establishing rapport and being distant and analyzing the situation. What we want to do is engage the family, engage the individual, get the person to know that we're going to hold them through this particular process. Next slide, please. This is the seat of where the trauma occurs. That's where it's seated. That's where it gets frozen. So we can't access our cortex. We can't access our compassion and reasoning and language. So we know that inside, this is our survival mode. We've gone from being victimized to now being survivors. And with that survival mode, with that activation of the limbic system, with the amygdala and the hippocampus being hyper aroused, that is also the seat. If we can find a way to activate that part of it, we can help the person process whatever it is that they need to. Next slide, please. This can get very complex. There's neuroscientists that are really working, real hard at helping us understand it. But what's important here for us is to understand this notion of attachment theory, because that's really where we're going to be able to hold the client, the family, the community that we're working with. So Daniel Siegel says that structure and function of the brain are directly shaped by interpersonal experience. In other words, the more human contact that we have, the more that our central nervous system, our synapses develop and find a way to create. So if these connections actually happen, we develop what's called regulation of affect. All right, and let me give you an example of regulation of affect. I go take my grandson, let's go to the park. Hey, I'm excited. Yeah, we're gonna go play. We go to the park. We get to the park and the slides are not working. The swings aren't working. They're doing some construction. And my grandson says, I'm mad, Grandpa. What's the matter, mijo? I wanted to play with you on the slides. And, okay. So, first he's excited. Now he's upset. We don't have slides, but you know what? We got a couple of sticks and let's pretend we're Pirates of the Caribbean and, let's go for it and run around and chase each other and do all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, Grandpa's got to go. He's got patients he's got to see. So, mijo, I got to go. Right? Shoulders go down, head goes down. Oh, okay, Grandpa. So we got to go. And can we stop and get an ice cream? We go, we get an ice cream cone. And my grandson says, hey, you know what, Grandpa? I had a nice time with you today. So regulation of affect, regulation of affect. Normal functioning, my mother would always say to me, I talk about these incredible theories and explain this. I know that. I know that. What do you think? I don't know that? Baby cries. You hold the baby. You take care of the baby. You make sure that the baby is okay. So regulation of affect. Next slide. However, what happens when we're traumatized, when we have, an activated limbic system, and we have poor relationships, and we become isolated, and we are filled with shame and guilt because we have something has happened to us, and yet we feel like it's our fault. We did something to create this. How many women feel that in their victimization, they're responsible for it? Or the person who was chemically dependent ran into somebody and they don't remember, but ultimately that survivor guilt comes through. Veterans, you ask a veteran, what's the worst thing about going to war, being deployed, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan? And they'll tell you, I came back. My guys didn't come back. Guys from my town. So it's called survivor guilt, and that can be debilitating. It can force people to continue to feel unworthy, continue to feel shameful, continue to feel full of guilt, and it gets played out in all different kinds of ways. Since we feel bad, we want to feel better about ourselves, so we get lost in work. We get lost in having multiple sexual partners. We get lost in food. We get lost in chemicals that we use. Substances. Substance abuse is profound when you've got somebody who's been victimized. I have a young man that I just got, in fact, I didn't, his father hospitalized him, 27-year-old Salvadoreño who was victimized twice in El Salvador. Somebody put a gun to his face, in his mouth twice, migrated to the United States, came here. Effeminate looking young man, but, not uncommon for San Francisco. Got assaulted by 5 homophobic men who just beat him senseless and re-traumatized, and started using methamphetamine as a way of managing his anxiety, his trauma, his activated limbic system. Ultimately, finally, we got him hospitalized. Psychiatrists agree with me. He's not going anywhere. He's in bad shape. He needs some stability. So we're making sure he's being attended to right now. So in any event, the idea, you don't have a regulation, right? You become frozen, you become numb, you become stuck in a place of that activated limbic system doesn't allow you to relax. And there's a methodology called sensory motor psychotherapy that a number of people, Janina Fisher and Bessel van der Kolk, like using, which really help mirror for the client that you're working with how their body is. You know, why is it that I'm always feeling like I've got the weight of my shoulders this way? Because I don't feel like I can sit back and breathe in and feel like I belong. I feel like I really don't have a place. There's something wrong with me because these things happen to me. So that's another technology that people use to help people with that. Next slide, please. It's also helpful for people to understand their attachment styles. As we work with folks, explaining to them what a secure attachment is. I see you, I understand you, I'm gonna take care of you. You're a child, you're an infant, you're very young, you're wet, you're hungry, you're cold, you need to be soothed and attended to, so the caretaker provides for you and you feel attended to. I see you, I understand you, and I'm gonna take care of you. We call that a blessing in Mexico and around the world. Newborn comes in and we welcome that child. So they are a blessing. We hold them, we attend to them, we love them, we care for them. And that person feels okay about themselves. However, not all human beings have the benefit of having secure attachment in their life. Some people do not have somebody who cares for them to that extent. Sometimes the caretaker provides for the child. The child is hungry, but the caretaker brings them a blanket. The child is thinking, okay, you know, I'm still hungry and now I'm hot, a little bit confused. So you start relying on yourself. You develop what's called a dismissing attachment style. Many people raised in domestically violent homes or chemically dependent homes, everyone develops a different role. And the hero, the super competent one, takes care of everybody else. That person learns to have a dismissing attachment style because he couldn't count on anybody to be there for him. So there's the other impaired attachments is the anxious avoidant, which is somebody's preoccupied, wondering when the caretaker comes and they bring them food and they take care of them, but they're so anxious, they're so nervous, they're really ambivalent about being there. That person begins to say, okay, mom takes care of me, but why is she so nervous? What's wrong with me? What's wrong? Why does she feel that way? And so that insecure attachment of being preoccupied is always waiting to be abandoned, always waiting for the other person, for the other shoe to fall. Always something is going to happen. You don't have that security. Again, insecure attachment. And then ultimately the disorganized is, you know, those families like I was raised in this kind of household where, you know, it was chaotic. You know, there's chaos going on all the time. If you had a need, you know, people walked out on you, or they were too busy drinking or too busy smoking or too busy doing other things that couldn't attend to the children, couldn't really be there, or they got beat, they got thrown up against the wall, or the provider walked out on them. So people learn to live in chaos. And if they didn't, they weren't in a chaotic situation, they created a chaotic situation. That is known, for those of you that are clinicians, as borderline psychopathology. So it's the basis foundation of having disorganized attachment. So our task is to provide a secure attachment as a traditional healing person, as a clinician, as a psychologist, as an advocate, as a promoter of health, a coach, if you will. We want to model. I see you, I understand you, and I'm going to be here for you. And I'm the one that's going to listen. I'm the one who's going to be here. I'm the one who's going to bring the papalote the blanket to hold us in a situation so that you can work through whatever it is that you need to work through. Next slide, please. So, part of my work and what I've tried to do is kind of take a look at the whole system and wonder what's wrong with this picture, right? So if we understand that our limbic system is hyper aroused, right side of the brain hyper aroused, occipital region is hyper aroused, left side of the brain is not working, and our frontal lobes aren't functioning, we emphasize in the area of trauma work cognitive behavioral therapies. Cognitive behavioral therapies, left brain dominated methodologies, logical reasoning methodologies, and then we add medication to it. So I say, okay, if we are working with an activated limbic system that is right brain driven, but we're trying to emphasize a left part of the brain that isn't online, how much sense does that make? I'm not saying cognitive behavioral therapy does not work, but initially we've got some work to do. We've got to bring down the hyperarousal of the left side, right side of the brain, bring down the nightmares and the flashbacks, get some calming and soothing, and let the language get back online before we start processing our relationship between stimulation, feelings, thoughts, and then ultimate behaviors. First, we've got to find some safety. First, we've got to find some clarity and some balance, some equilibrium in order for us to feel normal again, in order for us to not feel so anxious, so nervous, and so expecting for the shoe to fall. Next slide, please. So what we're doing is we're concentrating on these clusters of symptoms that we know today as post-traumatic stress disorder. In World War I and II, it was called shell shock. That's what it was called. When it first started, you went to war and you were shocked by blasts and rifles and weapons and all that type of stuff. Later on, after World War II, you came back, the military people, the veterans came back and they suffered from battle fatigue. Same symptomology, same difficulty. People come back having a hard time to adjust, having a hard time to be present, to be available. They were suffering from battle fatigue. And then, oh, by the way, during all of this time, there weren't enough therapists to be available to help the veterans. So the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association started working with the VA to provide group therapy. That's what group therapy became popular after World War II as we moved into the Korean War and then the Vietnam War. And that's where the marriage between the VA and the American Psychological Association worked. Use of medications, try to treat everybody in group. That's still kind of, the way, as well as now we have other approaches that we use. But nonetheless, then we, in the Vietnam War, we called it post-traumatic stress disorder. So these are all the symptomology. These are the clusters of symptoms. So let me give you a different explanation. In Mexico, we've been treating this, and in Central America, we've been treating this problem for a very long time. Remember, we were colonized by the Spanish, and the civilizations and societies had their own war situations. They had slavery. They, whenever colonized people as well. But the coming of the Europeans really was severely, there was a Holocaust, millions of people died because of disease and horrific experiences of trauma. So we have a contextual, just like you folks here in Guam, the Chamorro people have experienced intergenerational trauma. Mexico, we are known throughout the world as in Spanish, it's los hijos de la chingada. We are the sons of the violated mother. And that's who we are. We're the mestizo, European and indigenous people that married together. So we have that level. And in Mexico, we say when you have a small fright, it's called espanto. You know, you walk out of the street, the car almost runs you over, put on the brakes, all the same things that you're looking at here. Avoid hyperarousal, the palpitations, the shortness of breath, the tension in the body, and then it kind of goes away. Okay, nothing happened to me. I didn't get hit. Almost did, but I didn't. And so I can, you know, let it go and no problem, right? The next level that occurs is when something serious happens. There's been a violation, there's been a robbery, there's been something that's occurred to us. We develop what's called miedo, or fear. We have how many disorders in DSM for anxiety disorders? We have obsessive compulsive disorder. We have generalized disorder. We have you name it, you know, agoraphobia, a million mental disorders related to anxiety. We just call it miedo. Tienes miedo. So that's that level, and you know, it's generalized, and it can be reality based because something did happen to me, or I'm afraid that something is going to happen to me, which is ongoing treatment for generalized anxiety disorder. We have to help people cognitively. If your left side of the brain is functioning and present, if it's functioning and present, then you can do, you know, some of that work. If not, you got to calm the system down. Then this PTSD business, from a traditional medicine perspective in Mesoamerica, is called susto. And what susto means is the loss of the soul, loss of the spirit. Part of why I am so fragmented is because I've lost part of myself. Ask any rape victim what it's like for her or for him when they've been violated sexually, how fragmented they feel, how they're no longer whole. So treatment of susto means that in order to deal with the re-experiencing of the traumatic memory, the flashbacks, the nightmares, the avoidance, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to address it. I want to forget it. It didn't happen. Let's not deal with it. Give me some Xanax. Give me an SSRI. Give me some Seroquel. Methamphetamine. Let me have some alcohol. Let me smoke. Whatever it takes for me to numb so that I no longer have to feel it. Youngsters start cutting themselves, right? They want to cut themselves because they're numb. So I'm hyper aroused. I can't stop myself. I'm, you know, distraught. I am dysregulated. Who am I now? Who am I now? How many men have come into treatment and they've said to me, you know, the guy put a gun to my head and I didn't stop it. You know, they took my van. My wife was there. My daughter was there. I couldn't stop it. But you didn't die. You didn't do anything to react to that. And then he says to me, well, when I was 12 years old, I finally met my father, who was a military guy, and we started to have a relationship, and I started to feel comfortable with him. And I asked him, hey, Dad, Papi, can you get me some shoes? And his father took that gun and put it to his head and said, men don't ask other men for anything. So this 30-year-old man who's been traumatized because his car got jacked, a gun got put to his head, is also traumatized because as a young boy, this happened to him as well. And while this is going on, his wife and her sister are so traumatized they can't speak about what's happened with the carjacking because their early trauma had to do with them coming home from school one day. The young one was 4 years old at that time. The other one was maybe 8. And their uncle had showed up to the house. They owned some property. They owned a home. and the uncle wanted to take it away. And it was the gangs were just starting to become prevalent in El Salvador. And the gang member that was there with the uncle brought a machete. And he said, "We're taking your house." And the guy says, "No, you know, this is my house, my home. This is my family. Get out of the way. We're taking your house." And the wife got in front, says, "Get away from here. This is our home." And they took the machete and they sliced her arms. Didn't come off all the way, but she's bleeding. And they had cut up the dad so badly that the 4-year-old held his head on her lap. So the reason she could not explain or express herself because of the complex trauma she suffered is that was re-triggered. So part of the work, that fragmentation, who am I when this thing happens to me? Why does this happen to me? What kind of person am I that this continues to happen to me? Because part of my spirit, my tonali, is no longer connected. So part of the work that we have to do, and that's where our attachments, we have difficulties. This young woman I'm talking about, when she first came to deal with the trauma and we worked with her, she was trying to get pregnant. She couldn't get pregnant. She didn't want to recreate whatever had happened in her family before. Ultimately, finally, she was secure enough, safe enough that she was able to get pregnant. And now they're a thriving family after working through the trauma and bringing the spirit back. Next slide. So what we want to do in this approach is to integrate the aspects of the brain, of the body, of the mind, of the heart, and of the spirit. We know it as biopsychosocial spiritual. You know, if you're in recovery, you're clean and sober, you've been to 12-step meetings, they talk about that all the time. But this is just a way of healing that has gone on for centuries, since way before the coming of the Europeans. In fact, pre-Columbian psychotherapists actually worked way before Freud, way before Jung, way before Adler, by being beveled mirrors. And so if you came to see a therapist, you were given a reflection and you needed to decide what you wanted to do about that reflection. So we want to integrate and deal with the person holistically. We know the energy from the top part of the head and the heart and the liver all need to be integrated. So the important thing is to have a space to be able to hold the person and allow the different aspects of the functioning to reintegrate. In neuroscience, we call that neuroplasticity. There are certain parts of the brain that no longer can function, but other parts of the brain will pick it up. So part of the new treatment approaches to doing this kind of work is EMDR, eye movement reprocessing and desensitization, and a newer technology called brain spotting, where you're actually working and connecting to the cortical, subcortical areas to be able to deal with the activation or resourcing internally so that you can let go of what you need to let go of and welcome in. And we say this, I've been running Círculos de Hombres for 30-something years. Everyone has carga, everyone has baggage, and everyone has a regalo. Everyone has gifts. So rather than diagnose you and rather than give you an analysis and give you a diagnosis, why don't we just look at the carga and let's acknowledge the regalo? Because you can work in balance. You can work with somebody, help them get rid of the carga and recognize the regalo. So the idea is we can incorporate Western and traditional medicine approaches. Next slide, please. So it's important. Jerry Teo is a colleague of mine, compadre of mine. We started the Círculo de Hombres, National Compadres. Now it's National Compadres Network. He's always had the spiritual sense and clarity to help us. So his approach to working, whether you're doing welcoming of children or doing ceremonial work or helping young men be competent, loving, caring men, helping men stop their domestic violence, helping women become empowered is within the collective. Dignity, love, trust, and respect of all people exists the wisdom and resources for a beautiful and harmonious tomorrow. So if we believe that, if we believe that people can heal, if we believe that we are the instrument of safety and security, we can help folks find their homeostasis, find their balance, find their rhythm, find their harmony, and call the spirit back. Call the spirit back. Next slide, please. Okay. So if we have a secure attachment, I see you, I understand you, and I'm going to be here for you. We convey that that person is wanted. They are not no longer a victim. You are sacred. If you SAR SARCED, scared, flip the words, sacred. Let's not be scared. Let's attend to our sacredness. You have a sacred purpose. And this is something that I will eventually ask whoever it is that I'm working with. What do you think the purpose was? Not that they're invited or they caused this trauma to occur, whatever the trauma was, it's not their fault. But what was the purpose? Why did this happen? Why did this happen to you? So I think it's important to clarify what that purpose is. And I'll give you an example. My father was murdered when I was 9 years old. I was the oldest of 5, so I helped raise them. I was the hero in the family. So I went to school and came home and I cooked and I cleaned. And I was numb and I was flat and blunted and I couldn't pay attention and I couldn't concentrate and I couldn't remember things. So I really did think I was stupid. There was something wrong with me. That's what my mother told me. So I figured that that's the way it was. The reality of the fact was I was traumatized and I was depressed. So years later, when I started to have children, I didn't start having children until I was in my 40s. I was frightened. I was scared to death to have kids because I didn't want to pass on the same legacy that was given to me: alcoholism, domestic violence, abandonment, neglect of the children. So Jerry and I and a number of men got together and we said, you know what? Women have circles and women have groups of people that they can speak to and talk to and do things together. And we go to the bar, we go to games, we watch soccer. Where do we go? So we brought men together. And this is where the Círculo de Hombres, the retreats sponsored by the National Compadres Network now after 33 years have occurred. And it was in those places that we learned how to be fathers. We learned how to be men that had dignity, that had word, that we had, we said what we meant, and we meant what we said, stopped using, started reflecting and being present with each other, being mirrors. Remember that old pre-Columbian idea of being the beveled mirror? We learned how to do that. We learned how to do that in ceremony. So the purpose of my being raised fatherless was to develop a system of nurturing and caring to teach young men how to do that. And my son says to me today, you didn't teach that to me, but I learned that here. So my purpose was for me to learn how to be a better grandfather. I wasn't a good dad, but I learned how to be, to attend to my sacredness in a way that I could be present with my children and then ultimately and do the work with them. And then now they all have their children and I can be present for them. So that's taught us our values. It taught us to be students and teachers of life. And most importantly, to learn how to be protective, how to provide safety and security for our families and our communities. Let me invite you to consider. We've been working in this field for 50 years on domestic violence. And the best that we have been able to come up with is to have shelters for battered women that really started off as shelters for animals, uh, to prosecute men for their behavior because they're traumatized, because they were abandoned, because they were neglected, and therefore we incarcerate them and we put them on probation and we send them to uh, court-ordered groups, and then we send the children to foster care because the parents aren't safe and they can't take care of them. What happened? What happened to the day when, if something occurred in a family and a man wanted to raise his hand against his wife or his daughter or somebody, all the men stood up. Didn't have to say anything. They just stood up. And the message was very clear: not here. You will not be abusive here. So part of the work, I think, is that we have to reclaim. That's what restorative justice is. The Maoris are teaching us that. If you have a problem, you killed your wife or you destroyed your family or you stole something from your family, the clans have to come together and they call out to each other and they sing to each other. And do you come in peace? And the warriors come out and they do the dance, and then you sit for as long as it takes, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes, to break bread and to catch up with each other. And then we're going to talk about how you're going to pay the loss of my daughter's life, your clan and my clan. That's what restorative justice is. So there are traditions in our cultures, wisdom, ancient wisdom, that we need to incorporate and bring back and use as a way to reintegrate the spirit, reintegrate our customs, reintegrate our traditions, because that's wisdom that we know. We know that. We didn't have to go to school to learn that. In fact, school's now starting to catch up. This neuroscience business, we've known this for centuries. For centuries, we've known the treatment of susto. But now we have neuropsychology that's teaching us what's wrong with our limbic system. Next slide, please. So these are all approaches that that I like incorporating. And again, the psychology is butterfly medicine. We want to hold the space. We want to wrap the person, the couple, the family, the community in safety and security. And sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's just having the couple just wrap themselves around with a blanket. In fact, in many Native communities, that's how you get married. You get married with a blanket, right? So that's what we want to intend to do. We're going to have a cocoon. We're going to have a safe, secure place where someone can be themselves and allow themselves to be, and to let go and to call the spirit back. So there needs to be cleansings. You've got to, we do it in a very specific way in Mexico. We use leaves and Mother Earth. We use an egg to absorb the negative energy because that's where the air is. We use alcohol or water, or flowered water, to shake up the nervous system, to bring the spirit back, to wake it up, call it back. And then we use the smoke as a blanket to call that spirit back. Ricardo, ven pa acá. Ricardo, ven pa acá. Ricardo, ven pa acá. Come back. Come back, Ricardo. Come back. And you say, yes, I'm willing to come back. And that's how we treated Vietnam vets. And that's how we treated men in the Mexican-American War. That's how we treated each other during our warring times before the coming of the Spanish. And those survivors of that Holocaust, that's how they were treated too. So susto has been treated for centuries. So the cleansing is one thing. Call back the spirit, call back that aspect that's been lost, that's gone someplace else. We use temescales, we use sweat lodges, you know, as a way to incorporate all of that. I don't know if you in Guam do that, or whether you go to do baths in the ocean or whatever it is, but whatever cleansing you can do. It's important to utilize all of the elements, fire, water, earth, and air, as a way of bringing back the spirit and bringing yourself in balance, in rhythm, in harmony. I spoke about the auricular acupuncture, the ear therapy, very important to help find an acupuncturist, a certified, licensed, knows what they're doing, and have all of your traumatized people get that treatment as well. Teach people how to meditate. They need to clear their mind up, because when they're frightened, they're afraid, they think they're responsible for it. Fear-based, it must be something wrong with me. Why does this happen to me? That's that survivor guilt. That's that shame. I want to help that person cleanse their mind. You had Bonnie Duran talk about meditation. So, whatever meditative processes are useful, exercise, whatever exercise people can do to help get those endorphins working in the body, breathing deeply. Yoga is always very good. And so incorporating all of this aspect first, because it's bottom up, earth first in your body until your central nervous system can get clarified. Then we can do psycho. Then we can use cognitive behavioral therapies to let people process why they believe these things have happened to them. EMDR is a good technology. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's very useful. I am now learning how to apply brain spotting. Seems to go a little bit faster for those people that are amenable to it. So any technologies that we can use, and I'm sure they're going to change and modify and improve as time goes on. But as long as we integrate the ancient wisdom with the modern technologies, the better it's going to be for folks. And let me tell you, I work in high tech. I'm a therapist for a lot of high tech people. All the same problems. You may have high tech capabilities. You may know how to program. You may know how to build robots, but you still don't know how to talk to your partner. You still don't know how to have a good time and sit down. You still don't know how to be romantic anymore. You still forget that you got to make time for your kids. You don't talk to your parents anymore because they're not with it, right? They don't know as much as you know. But that's ancient wisdom. So I would invite you to consider an old African prayer. We pray for the children because there's a long way for them to go. We pray for the elders that they have walked a long way. And we pray for us who have to take care of all of them. Next slide, please. So again, reiterating what we already know, in order to deal with it holistically, completely, integrate, have integrity in our approach, we have to do it all. Physical, social, spiritual, psychological, it all has to be attended to. Next slide. So it's important to recognize that even though we do some internal work, we help a particular person, we help a particular couple, we help a family, we help a community, that unless we do something about it, nothing will change. So Martin Baró, who was a psychologist and a priest, said a society becomes accustomed to using violence to solve its problems, both large and small, is a society in which the roots of human relations are deceased. This psychotherapist says after a traumatic event, a person's fundamental assumptions about who they are, they lose their sense of trust and safety. The person finds themselves isolated because of the sense of betrayal and a lack of community to protect their safety. So when the discrimination stops, when the war-torn situation stops, those wounds are still there. How do we, as a society, as a community, help others? The Colombians, given their extensive history of violence, narcotraficantes, war-torn situations, they have violenceology departments now in schools. And they, as well as the Argentinos, remember the people that disappeared during that time of repression by calling out the names of their people and doing ceremony and having demonstrations so that we don't forget. We don't forget our people that have passed on. Next slide, please. But we have to do it with intent in order to provide safety. We incorporate cultura, we incorporate culture. This is an altar. We teach young people, families, men, women, how to have their own altar. How do you leave the carga on the altar? You have fire, water, earth, and air. And as you can see, the young people that are associated with gangs and lose themselves, we do masks. We do these máscaras. And in Spanish, máscara means máscara, more face. And we use an approach called cara y corazón. Face, respect, and dignity, corazón, feelings, and integrity and safety. So if you can see the very first mask that a young person makes, they're kind of the clowns, right? So we ask them, who's clowning you? Why do you feel like you have to be a clown in order to put your face out? Until they learn more about themselves and the inside of the mask will have what their feelings are. Eventually, the mask will not be a clown, but will be a more definitive mask that represents how they see themselves in the world. Part of the máscara work that we have to do for the integration of their palabra inside of who they are. Next slide, please. We use traditional, this is all the elements that you need to do the cleansings, to do the limpias, so I work comprehensive crisis services, my colleagues, so we're dealing with suicides, homicides, vehicle fatalities, all those types of things. They come to me and they say, will you clean my space for me? Can I get a cleansing today? Okay, will you pray for me? My son is, just diagnosed with cancer. So they accepted these traditions as a way of self-care for themselves. So I would recommend all of you, I use this for all of my clients, is to get Jerry Theo's book, Recovering Your Sacredness. That's a resource that I use with all my clients. It's a good meditative process because it says we are important as well. We need to cleanse ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to call the spirit back ourselves. We need to be remembered as sacred. Next slide, please. And so I do grief work. And so part of the grief work is, we make these altares, these little nichos. And so in the nicho, if you can see, there's pictures of the person, what they like to do. You can be very traditional Mexican way. If you saw Coco or Encanto, for example, you'll see, different kinds of traditions, whether it's you're Colombian or whether you're Mexican, to remember the ancestors. We don't forget them. We pray to them. I pray to the North, and I ask my mother to help me every day because my mother prayed for us 3 or 4 times a day. All of us that she remembered everybody's birthday, everybody who was suffering, everybody who had a hard time, everybody who was studying for an exam. She remembered us. And every first of the month, she would do the monedas. She'd go to the church and have 3 different coins for each person. So they would have housing, food, and care, So and she had a particular prayer that she did. And so now that she's passed, she's been gone for 2 years. We all do and maintain that tradition. We do the monedas every month, first of the month. Next slide, please. So I work with other healers. Ernesto Olmos is a artist, maker of instruments, healer in his own right, an anthropologist, is an engineer, an architect. These are all instruments that he makes. And so he teaches young people how to make these instruments, how to make the sounds. So we'll do workshops with young people and they will recreate the sound of the jungle, of the selva. And so not only do they learn the instruments, but they learn where the sound came from, how to replicate the sound, how to use that to meditate and to maintain their balance. Next slide, please. And then he also teaches them how to use these instruments to do that. Next slide, please. And also trains them how to meditate and how to align the chakras by the use of the bells, use of the flutes, use of the instruments. Next slide, please. How one rebalances the energy within the body. Call the spirit in. Connect with your mind, connect with your heart, connect with your body. We have sobadoras, somatic therapists. We have acupuncturists. We have yerberos, yerberas, people who understand the herbs, the use of the herbs. We have people, crazy psychologists like me, are integrating these EMDRs and brain spottings in the cleansings and in the temescales. So in order for us to get re-rooted in Mother Earth, re-rooted into the ocean, re-rooted into the air, re-rooted and be one with nature, so we no longer are spinning out. We no longer are frightened. We no longer are fragile. We no longer are alone. We bring in the community, and we don't do it ourselves. And so this is the modelo, this is the modern, this is the butterfly medicine that I brought today to you. And I always appreciate being invited to come and share the medicine. I'm going to listen to your panel tomorrow morning. It's going to talk about chamorro healing, because I want to learn from you as well. And so feel free to get the book, get Cultura de Bienestar. Jerry Teo has a book chapter in there. My model for dealing with trauma is there. A number of other healers are in there. And then Jerry Teo's book, Recovering Your Sacredness, you can always also find on Amazon for $14. So we'll entertain it if we have time. I don't know, do we have time for any questions, reflections, thoughts on our butterfly medicine? And the last slide, I think, is you have my information there, and you're all welcome to get a copy of this if you want a copy of this. That's my number. That's my email, the Comcast, and then my website, ricardocarrillophd.com. So you can either, if you've got questions in the chat, or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask it, feel free.
Hi, Dr. Ricardo. I have a question.
Okay.
So how do you get people comfortable enough to ask for help?
How do we do what?
How do you get people comfortable enough to ask for help?
Well, usually people come to me when they're in the middle of a crisis. You know, they're so overwhelmed, they're so frightened, they're so scared. You know, they've been assaulted, they've been robbed, they've been, you know, they're traumatized in the moment. Usually we get people in. I've got, you know, women that have been run over by a car. Somebody died in a vehicle accident. So we engage them in the crisis work in any way that we can to be present for them. We got to bring them food, help with the funeral expenses, make ourselves available for whenever they're ready to talk about what's going on. And that's the crisis work. I also work with the police department. I'm one of the few departments in the world now that works with the police. I still think we need safety, public safety. So I work with men and women who have been trained in de-escalation and time and distance, and really care about the community. And we work together as a team so that we can engage and work with people, because we're more skilled at engagement than they are. Their weapons and safety, that's their thing. So so we'll get them in that moment, but not everybody is ready. I'll give you an example. A month ago, I was called out to one of our navigation centers, and the police were there, the EMTs were there, the captain from the fire department was there, because this woman who was chemically dependent had given birth inside of a porta potty. She cut the umbilical cord, the baby died. We got called to provide support to the women, to the staff who worked there, because that was traumatic. They were livid. They were furious. They were, how could this have happened? So we, provided safety, space, let them debrief, let them talk about it, wanted to make sure that, they were okay, and that woman was going to be investigated and looked at, but the baby was gone. Baby was gone. So in that moment in time, when the crisis actually occurs and we help stabilize and clarify what's going on, people are amenable. And so they will call me and say, listen, I want to talk to you about this. I want to talk to you about that. In my private practice, I'm known as the trauma specialist. So people come looking for me. I'd like some EMDR. I'd like to do some brain spotting. I've just lost, lost my significant other, member in my family. A lot of COVID deaths, So, so the idea is that you make yourself available, and you're willing to be present. You'd be willing to be able to be available so that they can do whatever work they need to do in order to make that happen. And everyone is going to deal with their trauma in a very different way. So, but you use any methodology that you have. If you use motivational interviewing to help understand the person how to get to a place where they can contemplate doing something different. If they, are, pressured because they got some court involvement, they're being pressured by somebody else in the family to look at themselves, we want to help them. We want to enter wherever the client is. But the important thing is that you feel the safety and you feel the willingness of the person to be available for that person to go wherever they need to go in order to make it happen. So, but I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a psychotherapist for 40 years, and recently in the last 10 years become a traditional healer. So the more that I'm available, and let me tell you something, sometimes it affects me. That baby that died, that baby that was born in the porta potty, that I felt that, because that could have been my grandson. That could have been my granddaughter. So I felt for those other women. And I also felt for the woman that was so distraught and so traumatized and so chemically dependent that she wasn't aware that she was pregnant. And we lost that young life. So, we have to take care of ourselves too, right? We have to do our cleanse. We have to do our debriefing. We have to go and find people that help us when we're in the middle of this, because sometimes you're not aware. It took me 6 weeks before I realized, this one hurt. So, just be present, just be available, just be willing to offer the butterfly medicine, and the people will open up.
Thank you for answering my question. There's another question in the chat from Rachel Bora. What is the first thing you would recommend for someone who was traumatized by a near-death experience?
By a near-death experience? Well, if the person almost died, they didn't, it would be important to explore what that meant for that person. What was the purpose and meaning, and what are they going to do with their life? I used to think that I was Dr. Death, right? I do the death and the grief and the loss and the trauma. And somebody said, no, man, you're there for life. You help people learn how to live, how to recover, how to recognize that there's a purpose and meaning for them. What is it? So we need to explore it. We need to have, that person needs to be safe enough and clear enough and trusting enough to be able to open up, to be able to explore the situation for themselves so they can have some purpose and meaning. What does it mean for you now that you're alive? I'll give you an example. I had a woman who was an administrator at one of the junior colleges. She's now the president. She got on Southwest Airlines flight several years ago, and the window got pulled out, right? and a woman got sucked out and she actually died. She was 2 seats in front of this woman. So she came in to see me because, hey, she almost died. And it was near-death experience. And so she processed, she did everything. She did the acupuncture, she did Reiki, she did, other kinds of indigenous ceremonies. She was a mariachi, she played music. But in therapy, she would pray in her own way. She would call her own spirit out. She would go and explore all of the traditional healers that she needed to be integrated and whole in, and revisited her life to such an extent that she found purpose and meaning. What do I do? What do I need to do? I got a second chance. I got grandchildren. I got children. I've got a university. I've got some writing I got to do. So we did that for a whole year. Workman's Comp took care of it, but I learned probably just as much as she did about healing practices and about respecting somebody's own internal idea and prayer and ceremony and song. And she's really quite a scholar and quite a role model for women. This educator. And so, it happens. And so giving the person the space to let them find their purpose and meaning, not directing it, not pressuring them, not lecturing them, not giving them, let them find the purpose and meaning within themselves so they can clarify what they need to do with their lives. Remember, this is very different than doing psychotherapy, extended, we're going to piece people in analysis for years. Traditional medicine, get in and help the person get better, and let's move on. Get in and get out. Get in and get out. Help them reintegrate, bring the spirit back, and let it go.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr.
Right.
Ricardo. And we have time for one more question from Geraldine Quijado. How is progress measured through this healing?
How is progress measured through what?
How is progress measured through this healing?
Okay. Well, do people feel better about themselves? Do they feel more integrated? Have they been able to let go? Are they less symptomatic? Are they less symptomatic? Are they less anxious? Psychic numbing. Can they relate to their feelings? Are they more integrated? Are they find purpose and meaning? Are they more holistically connected to their like I said, body, mind, heart, and spirit? Psychosocial, social, spiritual. How much integrated? And usually when people get done with this particular approach, you can always assess and analyze and use pre-test, post-test, all different kinds of stuff. In EMDR and brain spotting, we use SUDS, right? Subjective scales, scale of 0 to 10, 0 less activated, 10 most activated. Usually within the session, the client will tell you they might be an 8 or a 9, very activated, very dysregulated, very emotional. And then working through the process, the person feels less than, maybe a 5, maybe a 4, maybe a 2, maybe a 1. And that may take several sessions. So you're assessing and being aware. But it's important to get from the client, from the family, from the community that you're serving, do they feel empowered? East Oakland became a little bit safer once people started doing things to help each other out, like taking martial arts classes, like making sure that they didn't go to the bank alone, making sure when they were leaving work, if they worked someplace late at night, they saw other people that might be at risk and they would give them rides. So communities also stand up and try to do whatever they need to do in order to make each other safe. That's another indicator that we've done what we needed to do, not only treat 1 or 2 people individually, but as a community where they feel safer and begin to not be alone as much, not be as isolated as much, and work with our community resources, firemen, police, health practitioners, healers, teachers, whoever is in the community, so people know who they can refer to and who they can use in the moment.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ricardo.
Thank you for the invitation. I always appreciate coming and sharing. Every year it gets better all the time.
All right, and thank you for joining us for day 1 of the 22 Social Work Regional Training Conference. As a reminder, the conference will resume tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And to access the conference, you can use the same link that you used today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.